Okay, we've been talking about changes, but I want to talk about changes in the people of our lives and our relationships. Again, as seasons go in our life, we enjoy certain aspects of it. So, summer gets too hot, we complain. Fall's great, I love it. Winter comes, it's too cold. And spring can be very tempestuous. It can be beautiful and unpredictable, especially in our area. But people do change. We change. And as much as we don't like change, it's going to happen. You know, different things and different dynamics come across in everyone's life, and little by little often we begin to change, and sometimes they're very noticeable and sometimes it's slow, and then we get to see them later on. So when we look at this part about navigating the changes in life and in our business relationships and our personal relationships, we got to look at this, that when the changes come, we may not always like it, but sometimes we can't do anything about it. I've had employees throw a tantrum about some kind of change taking place within a company. And it doesn't matter that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of dollars was spent on this change. They expect everybody to capitulate to their likes and their dislikes. And unfortunately, some of those people just have to go bye-bye because you can't go back. Same thing about human beings. People change whether I like it or not. We try to change people, and that's always a bad thing because we end up usually making it worse. So we have to just adapt. Now, some people are safe, and some people are toxic, and some people are in between. I loved watching my children grow. They were wonderful little creatures that had various challenges at very different stages. Being up at 2 and 3 and 4 in the morning was rough and tough, and then they got past that. Then they were into everything, and they learned the word no, because we told them no a lot. Oh man, the terrible 2s, the terrible 3s, tyrants, as we navigate to help them get through that. And then they are kind of wonderful little creatures, and then maybe for teenage years, some of us have really met some challenges. Didn't like that. I can tell you, my son kept me on my toes. But, sometimes these changes are for the best, and sometimes they're not so good. And I wish that we could always predict what's going to happen in people when they start changing, or something comes along to change who and how they respond to life and us. We go along, it's happy, it's nuts, and we can get up to where it's really bad. And so life has those kind of aspects, whether I like the summer or the winter, whether I like some people or not. But, it's how we adapt and how we treat people is the best approach to navigating these changes. These changes come about for many reasons, and sometimes we don't even know what the reasons are, and we may never know. Health does impact. I had a head injury that changed me. And so my wife was married to one man, and then a different guy showed up at the end of the day after the head injury. And then there was a navigation that she and all of us had to go through, myself included. And then I became a different man than the head injury man. So there were some changes. So health does impact. There are priorities that change for people. A lot of our friends in high school are not close to today because our priorities changed. And some of us, we've kept it together because our priorities were able to accept that we all have priorities and we have families and that. Those who don't like the fact that they're no longer the center of the world in which we live often drop off because they don't realize those priorities. There's crises such as the head injury, such as economic upheaval, or other kind of things that go on. And, whatever the issues are, it's difficult sometimes for the individual to change, and it's often difficult for us to accept the change. But that's the problem that we all have to come to terms with. How are you going to deal with the fact that people change? I don't like that people change. This is why marriages fall apart. Spouses break apart because sometimes there's a change. Again, we talked about kids, they change, and, our parents change. Funny thing, my dad got smarter as I got into my 30s. By 35, he was getting to be very smart. By 40, I thought he was a pretty wise guy, you know. But that adaptation of children, you know, my oldest and my son didn't get along real well when they were kids. They get along great now, but sometimes that reverses, and sometimes our relatives. But what happens when it's at work? What happens when we go to work and we find out that the people in our life, again, for these many reasons, maybe changed, whether they're known or they're not known. You know, I had an ally for many years, and she was a great ally. And so as a client, when she took on a role with our one client, I was pretty happy. And for the beginning part, she was a good ally. But she had a lot of changes that I didn't know what was going on, and things were changing. And then she became less favored. She became defensive. And I didn't catch the changes. And I ended up becoming one that she perceived and seen as a challenge to her authority and to her ego and the outcome for her life. And so that flipped from a great ally to someone who opposed me and cost us a client. And I didn't catch it. And I should have been listening to what I'm telling you. We have to always be willing to accept the fact that things don't always stay the same. People, again, change for many reasons. Friendships, work associates, clients. I had a friend who was a real staunch conservative, and years later, I'm talking with him, knowing that where he came from. I tried to approach it, and I found out that he had become a very strong liberal, and I almost lost the friendship. You know, we need to keep in touch. We need to listen to the pulse. We can't assume that everything is stagnant in life, and that doesn't mean we have to change as who we are or our principles, but we have to make room and be willing to accept that people are going to begin to take on some changes in their life. And if we can't accept the changes, that often will create disruption. And sometimes we have to step away from some friendships and some situations, especially when they're too toxic or too harsh or too unreasonable for us to be with. But before we just toss people aside, we need to think about, is there a way of working with this individual in my life or my work environment or whatever environment I'm in? Do I have to toss everybody out because I don't agree? No. Again, we have to be able to say, all right, they have changed. And often when we get to talk with each other, we get to find out what these dynamics are, what's going on. And as I began to talk to my friend and realize where he was coming from, he held some real still conservative views, but he was also transitioning and becoming more in need of his future being secured by what he believed the liberal teachings and doctrines were. Whether I agreed or disagreed was not important at this point. I just needed to understand my friend and my business associate so I could keep working together. You know, I'm glad I took the time to listen to him and find out where he was coming from. I didn't have to change my viewpoint or argue with him. I had to, though, realize where he was coming from and why, and that helped us both understand. We became more centric in our discussion on certain things and more middle road, so not to offend one another in certain things. And again, I've changed in some of my philosophical viewpoints, political and others, over time. And so I meet with people who haven't seen me a long time, and we have sometimes we step on each other's toes without realizing it. So it's always good not to just go off the handle when our spouse starts thinking different than they used to think, or our children start maturing and start trying to take and learn on their own. I used to tell my son, you're smarter than me, but you just don't have enough life experience yet for me to trust you 100%. But I still love you. I still want you to make those changes. We had a lot of dynamic problems, but over time, we've come together on a lot of points, and now we have a great relationship, and I'm glad I didn't completely toss it out of the realm of possibility of restoration. Again, I may never agree with him 100% and he with me. That's not important. What's important is we agree to love one another and respect one another. And that's what you're going to need to find, is how to agree with people as people. That they're agreeable in that they're another human being with a different point of view. And you know, what I have found is I've been willing to listen. Whether I've come to totally agree with somebody, at least I get a new perspective that sometimes gets me to look at things in a better way than my old curmudgeon ways. So it's important for us to talk. Unfortunately, we haven't allowed for talk, and so now we just have people out shout each other, interrupt each other, just get violent with each other, and turn people off, and just respect the fact that they're another human being. And when we lose that value of the other person as being a valuable person, we create horrific outcomes for ourselves, for them, and for others. There's a ripple effect that will go out. So respect the fact that people will change, and you may not always like the change or agree with the change, but you know what? As we learn to love the fact that they're a human being and they have a right to a different opinion and they have a right to a different viewpoint, as long as they're not putting a gun to my throat or a knife or forcing me to believe their way or harming my children or threatening my life, hey, there's room for some disagreement. There's room for some difference of opinion, but I can still respect them, and they can respect me if I show respect. So I have to come to the terms that people will change in different ways, and I may not like the change, but can I still like the person? Hopefully they're safe. Hopefully that there's nothing evil about them, so that we can still learn to adapt to who they are with respect. Respect is the key to navigating many of these changes that we're going to come in conflict with. And they will be sometimes conflict because it's stormy, it's different. But to say right from the beginning, I want to still maintain the fact that we're going to be friends in the end. I made a decision many years ago about money. I watched money destroy friends, marriages, and family, and others. Money will not be what causes me to destroy another relationship. I'd rather lose my money than lose a relationship. And so I made that challenge of my life to say no more. And then when I had a business associate was losing money and we were disagreeing, and I finally just said, you know what, I value our friendship and our relationship more than the money. I'll take the loss. And they stopped, they looked, they laughed and said, how about we split the loss? I said, that's fine too. If that works for you, it works for me. Instead of letting it destroy a relationship and a friendship of 20 some years, it actually made a big difference and bonded the relationship even stronger. See what you can find in common grounds, if there's any, and if not, come back to one thing. That's another human being who has a right to a different viewpoint, a different understanding, a different faith. Even as much as I love my faith, I still respect that others have faith, and I don't like destroying people's lives, even though I think my faith is the right one. I'm willing to let people have a different opinion, a different viewpoint, because why? They're somebody important to not just me, but to many other people. To tear them down and to destroy them and to belittle them doesn't do anything to make our world a better place. It just creates more hostility, more broken relationships, and a greater divide. I'm hoping that we as a people can learn to overcome our differences. And by that I don't mean that we have to agree on every point, but we can agree that every person has a value. Every person has the right to their opinion. And if we truly believe what we believe, we can let them have a different opinion. I always know when somebody doesn't really truly believe what they claim. They get mad, they get defensive, and they go wacky. The more crazy they get, the more violent they get, the more upset they get, the less they really truly believe what they have to say. Hey, I don't have to fight about my faith. I have much faith that faith is so good that it doesn't matter whether yours agrees with me or not. It's not worth us fighting. I believe. Hey, you're not going to agree with me on every point, and I'm not going to agree with you on every point. But I can agree that you're a human being, and I hope you respect the fact that I'm a human being. Whether we agree on a lot of different things or not, well, I pray that we will be willing to say you have a right to breathe the same air that I'm breathing, and you have a right to hope and health and happiness, and that your children and grandchildren get the best in this life. Hey, they're going to change. I'm going to change. Life's full of change. We can't predict how everybody's going to adapt to those changes, but we can determine to be the stable force in relationships by loving, caring, and respecting the other people that are going through the changes in their life. Hope this helps you with this segment. We'll get back together after this break.